Welcome to HOA Neighbor Wars. The HOA treated receipts like contraband. "I do not care what you think you paid," Shirley shouted, jabbing her clipboard at my chest like it was a weapon. "We are past the grace period and your vehicle is already flagged for tow." I stood under the narrow eave of the Hillcrest Community Association clubhouse in Madison, Wisconsin, rain dripping off the edge between us, and kept my phone recording at chest height. She did not know I was filming. She did not know I had spent the last 72 hours connecting every loose thread in a case the HOA thought they had buried 3 years ago. All I knew in that moment was that the certified letter sitting in my truck had a case number I had never heard of, a cure deadline that expired tonight, and a threat of daily fines starting tomorrow if I did not comply with violations I did not commit. The letter referenced incident reports I never received, meeting minutes I never saw, and a compliance action dated 6 months before I even moved into the neighborhood. That was when I knew this was not a mistake. It was a cover-up. And Shirley Martinez, the board president and self-appointed rules interpretation chair, was standing right in the middle of it. I work as a construction project coordinator, which means I live and breathe documentation. Permits, change orders, inspection reports, contractor invoices. I know what a paper trail looks like when it is real, and I know what it looks like when someone is faking one. The moment I opened that certified envelope 2 days ago, I saw the seams. The case number format did not match any other notice I had ever received from the HOA. The signature block was missing the notary stamp required under our covenants. And the violation they cited, parking a work truck overnight in my driveway, had never been enforced against anyone else on my street. I checked. I took photos of 6 other driveways within 2 blocks, all with work trucks, trailers, and commercial vans parked overnight. 0 enforcement. 0 notices. 0 fines. Just me. Shirley folded her arms and tapped one foot against the wet concrete, her purple windbreaker gleaming under the dull gray sky. "You can request a hearing if you want, but the fine stands until you prove compliance. And just so you know, we can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." I nodded slowly, like I was taking notes, because I wanted her to get comfortable. I wanted her to say more. She always said more when she thought she was winning. Behind her, a couple stood on their porch across the parking lot, leaning against the railing like they were watching a pay-per-view event. The woman held a coffee mug. The guy had his arms crossed. Neither of them looked surprised. This was Hillcrest. Drama was the neighborhood sport. I had moved to Madison 8 months ago for work, taking a quiet duplex in Hillcrest because the rent was reasonable and the neighborhood looked clean. What I did not know was that the HOA operated like a private fiefdom, and Shirley Martinez had turned the compliance hotline into her personal inquisition. She controlled the email address. She logged the complaints. She decided what got escalated and what got ignored. And according to my friend Casey, who works at the county courthouse and helped me pull public records, Shirley had a cozy relationship with the tow vendor the HOA used. Call logs showed she contacted them directly, bypassing the management company, and the frequency spiked every time someone challenged her authority. It was not just selective enforcement. It was a racket. The rain picked up for a moment, then eased back to a drizzle. Shirley glanced at her clipboard and flipped a page, the clear plastic sleeve crackling. "Your file is thick," she said, almost conversational now. "Thicker than most. You might want to consider whether fighting this is worth the energy." A board member told me the same thing yesterday in a whisper outside the mailroom. "Just pay it," he said. "It is easier that way." When I asked him if the violation was even legitimate, he looked at his shoes and said, "Look, I know she is wrong, but I am not saying it on the record." That was when I realized the rot went deeper than Shirley. The board was complicit. They knew she was abusing the system, and they let it happen because it was easier than confronting her. I kept my voice calm. I want to see the original complaint and the meeting minutes where this was voted on. Shirley's smile tightened. That is all in your file. You can request copies through the management company. I already did, I said. They told me my file does not exist in their system. They said the case number does not match their format. Shirley blinked once, then recovered. Then you are looking in the wrong place. Try the clubhouse records. This is what she did. She moved the target every time you got close. First it was the management company. Now it was the clubhouse. Next it would be archived off-site or digitized, but not indexed yet or under legal review. The goalposts never stopped moving. The couple on the porch had not moved. The woman sipped her coffee. The guy pulled out his phone. I could see him angling it toward us. Good. More witnesses. More recordings. I needed all of it. Shirley tapped her clipboard again. Your deadline is tonight at midnight. If you do not submit proof of compliance and payment by then, the fines start tomorrow. $50 per day, compounding weekly. That is board policy. I am paying off debt, and one bogus collection notice could ruin months of progress. I could not afford to let this spiral. But I also could not afford to pay a fine for a violation I did not commit, because paying it would be an admission of guilt. It would validate the fake case number and give them leverage to hit me again whenever they wanted. I was trapped between two bad options, and Shirley knew it. So I asked the question I had been holding since I opened the certified letter. What is case number HC-2-021? Shirley froze for half a second. Then she glanced at her clipboard and said, That is your case. No, I said. That case number predates my move-in by 6 months. Whoever filed that complaint could not have been complaining about me, because I did not live here yet. Shirley's jaw tightened. Then it was amended. Show me the amendment, I said. Show me the meeting minutes where the board voted to transfer that case to me. Show me any document with my name and that case number together. She could not. Because it did not exist. And we both knew it. Shirley stepped back under the eave, and for the first time I saw her scramble. That is an administrative detail. You are fixating on the wrong thing. The violation is real. The fine is real. Whether the case number matches your move-in date does not change the fact that you violated the covenants. I smiled, just a little, because I wanted her to see it. Actually, it does. Because if the case was opened before I lived here, then either someone filed a fraudulent complaint in my name, or you backdated the case to make it look older than it is. Either way, that is a problem. A bigger problem than a work truck in a driveway. The guy on the porch had his phone up now, definitely recording. The woman leaned over and whispered something to him. Shirley noticed. Her face flushed. This is harassment, she said, louder now. You are trying to create a scene to intimidate the board. I am requesting public records, I said. That is not harassment. That is my right under the covenants you claim I violated. If my file is so thick, show it to me. Right now. Pull it out. Let us go through it together. Shirley turned and walked toward the clubhouse door. This conversation is over. I will see you at the hearing. And if you are not in compliance by midnight, the tow company will handle the rest. She yanked the door open and disappeared inside. The couple on the porch applauded, slow and sarcastic. The woman raised her mug in a mock toast. I waved back and pulled my phone down, stopped the recording, and saved the file with a timestamp. 72 hours until the board hearing. 72 hours to prove that Shirley Martinez had been running a fraud ring disguised as HOA enforcement, and that I was just the latest target in a scheme that had been going on for years. I got in my truck and opened the folder Casey had helped me build at the courthouse. 3 years ago, a homeowner named Greg Pallant filed a formal complaint against the HOA, claiming they had fined him for a violation that never happened. He provided proof, photos showing compliance, neighbor affidavits, and a time-stamped doorbell camera clip. The board dismissed his complaint without a hearing and placed a lien on his property for unpaid fines. 6 months later, Greg sold his house and moved out of state. The lien was paid at closing, and the case disappeared. No records, no follow-up, no accountability, just gone. But Greg was not the only one. I found 2 more complaints buried in the county records, both filed within the last 4 years, both claiming the HOA had backdated violations and fabricated case numbers. One homeowner, Linda Yates, claimed Shirley had called a tow truck to her driveway while she was at work and refused to provide documentation. The tow company slapped a bright yellow warning sticker on Linda's car before hooking it. Linda came home, saw the sticker, and paid the tow fee on the spot to avoid losing her car. She never got a hearing. She never got a receipt. She just paid and gave up. The second homeowner, Tom Ruiz, filed a public records request for meeting minutes and was told the minutes were under legal review and could not be released. When he pushed back, the board threatened him with a restraint order for harassment. Tom dropped it. All 3 cases had one thing in common. Shirley Martinez was the point of contact. She logged the complaints, she escalated the enforcement, she controlled the records. And in every case, the homeowner either paid up or moved out. No one fought back long enough to win. Until now. That night, I went back to the clubhouse after hours and used my key fob to access the file room. Every homeowner had access during business hours, but the board kept the really old files in a locked cabinet in the back. I did not have a key for that cabinet, but I did not need one. The lock was a joke. A flathead screwdriver in 15 seconds, and I was in. I pulled the drawer labeled Compliance Actions, 2021 to 2022, and started flipping through. Most of it was routine, late dues, landscaping violations, unapproved paint colors. But buried in the middle of the stack, I found a folder for case number HC-2-021. My case number. Except the name on the complaint was not mine. It was Greg Pallant. The violation was identical. Work truck parked overnight in driveway. But the date was 3 years old, and the resolution note said, case closed, lien satisfied. Someone had gone into Greg's old file, pulled the case number, and reassigned it to me without bothering to update the paperwork. They just slapped my address on a new letter, backdated the violation to make it look like I had been in non-compliance for months, and sent it certified. It was lazy. It was obvious. And it was exactly the kind of mistake someone makes when they have been getting away with fraud for so long they stop being careful. I took photos of every page in the folder. Then I pulled the adjacent files and found 2 more reassigned case numbers. Both tied to homeowners who had moved out. Both reassigned to current residents. Both with identical violation language and escalating fines. It was not just me. Shirley had been recycling old case numbers, fabricating compliance histories, and shaking down homeowners for years. And the board either did not know or did not care. I locked the cabinet, left the clubhouse, and drove to Casey's apartment. She was waiting with her laptop open, a pot of coffee brewing, and a stack of sticky notes color-coded by case. Okay, she said, sliding a printout across her kitchen table. I pulled the call logs for the HOA compliance hotline. Guess who made 83% of the outbound calls to the tow company over the last 2 years? I did not need to guess, Shirley, I said. Casey nodded, and guess when those calls spiked? I looked at the graph she had highlighted. Right after every board meeting where someone requested records or filed a formal complaint. Casey tapped the page. She is using the tow company as muscle. Someone pushes back, she calls the tow vendor, and suddenly their car is at risk. It is intimidation. And it is working. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the pile of evidence. We had the reassigned case numbers. We had the call logs. We had the county complaints. We had photos showing selective enforcement. We had testimony from 3 former homeowners who had been run out of the neighborhood. And we had Shirley on camera today, moving the goalposts and threatening me with a tow. All we needed now was one more piece. The smoking gun. The thing that would make the board panic and force them to act. Casey pulled up another document. I think I found it. She turned her laptop toward me. It was an insurance disclosure filed by the HOA with the county last year. The form required the board to report any pending legal claims, ongoing disputes, or potential liability risks. Under the section for harassment and abuse claims, the HOA had checked the box for none. But we knew that was a lie. Greg, Linda, and Tom had all filed complaints within the coverage period, and none of those complaints had been disclosed. If the insurance company found out the HOA had lied on the disclosure, they could deny coverage for any future claims. And if the board knew Shirley was committing fraud and did nothing, they could be personally liable. That was the trump card. The HOA insurance document showing their coverage was at risk because of harassment claims. I printed 2 copies, one for Casey, one for me. Then I texted my neighbor Marcus, the guy on the porch who had recorded Shirley today, and asked if he would meet me at the board hearing tomorrow night. He replied immediately, "Absolutely. Bring popcorn. This is going to be good." I spent the rest of the night drafting a formal records request and a demand letter. I kept the language clean, factual, and calm. No accusations, no threats, just a list of documents I was entitled to see under the covenants, and a timeline for response. I also included a copy of the insurance disclosure and a note that said, "I believe the board may have a duty to update this form in light of recent compliance activity." I did not say Shirley committed fraud. I did not say the board lied. I just planted the seed and let them connect the dots. At 11:45 that night, 15 minutes before the cure deadline, I submitted my formal compliance proof through the HOA portal. I included photos of my driveway showing the work truck parked legally, a copy of my lease showing my move-in date, and a side-by-side comparison of 6 other driveways in the neighborhood with work trucks parked overnight and zero enforcement. I attached the reassigned case file photos, the call logs, and the county complaints, and I CC'd every board member, the management company, and the HOA attorney. Then I hit send and went to bed. I woke up to 17 emails. 12 were automated bounce-backs. 3 were from neighbors asking what was happening. 1 was from Marcus saying, "Dude, you just nuked the board." And 1 was from the HOA attorney, sent at 6 in the morning, with the subject line, "Withdrawal of Representation." I opened it. The attorney had resigned, effective immediately, citing a conflict of interest and potential liability exposure. He recommended the board retain independent counsel and conduct an internal audit of all compliance actions dating back 3 years. He also noted that he would not be available to represent the board at tonight's hearing. The board had no lawyer, no cover, and a room full of homeowners who had just received my evidence dump. The hearing was scheduled for 7 that evening in the clubhouse community room. I arrived at 6:30 and found the parking lot already half full. Neighbors I had never spoken to were standing in clusters near the entrance, holding printed copies of my evidence email and pointing at highlighted sections. Marcus waved me over. "This is insane," he said. "Half the neighborhood is here." Shirley tried to cancel the meeting an hour ago, but the VP said it was too late. The notice already went out. I scanned the lot and spotted Shirley's car parked near the side entrance. Her purple windbreaker was visible through the driver's window. She was on the phone, gesturing wildly. Not a good sign for her. Inside, the community room was set up with a long table at the front for the board and rows of folding chairs facing it. A podium stood off to one side with a microphone. Shirley was already seated at the board table, her clipboard in front of her, her face locked in a tight smile. The other 4 board members looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. The VP kept glancing at his phone. The treasurer stared at the wall. The secretary flipped through a binder without reading it. And the at-large member, a quiet guy named Ron, just sat there with his arms folded. At 7, the VP called the meeting to order. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to acknowledge that we have received several records requests and a significant volume of correspondence regarding compliance procedures. The board takes these concerns seriously, and we will address them tonight." Shirley leaned toward her microphone. "This is a scheduled hearing for case number HC-2-021. We are here to determine whether the homeowner has cured the violation and whether the fines will be assessed. Let us stay on topic." The VP nodded. "Agreed. We will start with the homeowner's statement." He gestured to me. "You have 5 minutes." I walked to the podium, set my folder down, and opened it. I did not look at Shirley. I looked at the crowd. About 40 people had shown up, and most of them were holding copies of my email. I started with the basics. My name is listed on a certified letter referencing case number HC-2-021. That case number was originally assigned to a homeowner named Greg Palant 3 years ago. Greg moved out. The case was closed. Someone reassigned that case number to me without updating the file, without notifying me, and without providing any documentation. I submitted proof of compliance last night, and I also submitted evidence showing that this is not an isolated incident. At least 2 other current homeowners have been targeted using reassigned case numbers from old files. Shirley cut in. "That is not accurate. The case numbers are sequential and automated. You are misreading the format." I pulled out the file photos I had taken from the clubhouse cabinet and held them up. "These are copies from your own records. Case HC-2-021, opened in 2021, assigned to Greg Palant, closed with a lien satisfaction note, same case number. Same violation language. Different homeowner." I looked at the VP. Either someone in this room is reassigning old case numbers to shake down current residents, or your record system is so broken that it is generating fraudulent violations on its own. Either way, you have a problem. The room erupted. Neighbors started shouting questions at the board. One woman stood up and said, "I got a notice last year with a case number that did not match the format. I paid the fine because I thought it was easier. Now I want my money back." Another guy yelled, "How many people have you done this to?" The VP banged his gavel. "Order. Please." Let the homeowner finish. I glanced at Shirley. She was staring at her clipboard, her knuckles white. I continued. I also submitted call logs showing that the compliance hotline, which is supposed to be managed by the management company, has been controlled by one board member for the last 2 years. That same board member has made over 200 direct calls to the HOA tow vendor. bypassing the management company and the rest of the board. I pulled out the graph Casey had highlighted and held it up. These calls spike immediately after homeowners request records or file complaints. That is not enforcement. That is retaliation. And it violates your own covenants. Shirley stood up. This is slander. You are making baseless accusations to avoid paying a legitimate fine. I smiled because I had been waiting for this. I reached into my folder and pulled out the insurance disclosure form. Then I pulled out the county complaints filed by Greg, Linda, and Tom. And then I pulled out the tow release receipt I had been carrying in a sleeve as a prop, even though it was not mine, just to make her think I had even more proof. I set them all on the podium in a neat stack. These are not baseless. These are public records. And this, I said, holding up the insurance disclosure, is a form your board filed last year certifying that there were no harassment or abuse claims pending. But we have at least 3 documented complaints filed during that coverage period, none of which were disclosed. If your insurance company finds out you lied on this form, they can deny coverage for any future claims. And if the board knew about the complaints and did nothing, you could be personally liable. The room went silent. The treasurer looked at the VP. The VP looked at Shirley. Shirley looked at me, and for the first time, I saw panic. The VP cleared his throat. We are going to take a 10-minute recess. Board members, please join me in the side office. The crowd groaned, but the board stood and filed out. Shirley grabbed her clipboard and followed, her face pale. Marcus leaned over from his seat and whispered, "She is done. You just buried her." I nodded, but I did not feel victorious yet. Shirley was cornered, and cornered people do desperate things. 10 minutes later, the board returned. Shirley was not with them. The VP took his seat and adjusted the microphone. After consulting with the board and reviewing the materials presented tonight, we have decided to suspend all pending compliance actions pending a full audit of our record system. We will be retaining an independent auditor to review case files, meeting minutes, and vendor contracts. Any homeowner who believes they were incorrectly fined or cited is encouraged to submit a formal appeal, which will be reviewed as part of the audit. The fines associated with case number HC-2-021 are hereby rescinded, effective immediately. The VP paused, then added, Shirley Martinez has resigned from the board, effective tonight. Her role as Rules Interpretation Chair is eliminated. All compliance matters will now be handled jointly by the management company and a newly appointed compliance subcommittee. The room exploded. People cheered. A few clapped. One guy yelled, "Finally." I stood at the podium and let it wash over me. It was not just about me. It was about every homeowner who had been targeted, shaken down, and bullied by someone who thought she could rewrite the rules whenever it was convenient. It was about Greg, Linda, Tom, and everyone else who had given up and walked away. And it was about making sure it never happened again. The VP adjourned the meeting, and the crowd filed out slowly, stopping to shake my hand or ask questions about the audit. Marcus grabbed my shoulder and said, "You know she is going to come after you, right? She is not going to just disappear." I nodded. I know. But now she does not have a board to hide behind. And every move she makes from here on out is going to be under a microscope. I walked out to the parking lot and found Shirley leaning against my truck, arms folded, her face set in a cold smile. "We need to talk," she said. I stopped a few feet away and pulled my phone out, setting it to record again. "Go ahead." She glanced at the phone, then back at me. "You think you won tonight, but you did not. You embarrassed me in front of the entire neighborhood. You made me look incompetent. I did not make you look like anything," I said. I just showed people what you did. There is a difference. Shirley pushed off the truck and stepped closer. You are going to regret this. I have friends. I have connections. You have no idea how deep this goes. I held my ground. If you threaten me again, I am filing a police report. And if you come near my property, I am getting a restraint order. You are done, Shirley. Accept it and move on. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked to her car without another word. I watched her drive away, then got in my truck and sat there for a minute, letting the adrenaline drain. It was not over. Not completely. But it was close. The next morning, I woke up to another email. This one was from the management company. Subject line: Compliance Audit Timeline and Next Steps. The body of the email outlined a 6-week audit process, a temporary freeze on all fines and enforcement actions, and a homeowner survey to identify any additional cases of suspected fraud or abuse. At the bottom, there was a note. The board has authorized refunds for any fines assessed under reassigned case numbers. Please submit your refund request through the portal by end of business Friday. I submitted my request immediately. Then I forwarded the email to Greg, Linda, and Tom, along with a note that said, "You might want to check this out." Greg replied within an hour. I moved out of state, but I still want my money back. They put a lien on my house for something I did not do. I will file the paperwork today. Thank you for finishing what I started. 2 weeks later, the audit results came back. The independent auditor found 12 reassigned case numbers, 19 backdated violations, and 37 instances of selective enforcement. The tow vendor contract was terminated immediately, and the board voted to ban all direct contact between board members and enforcement vendors. Shirley's compliance hotline was shut down, and the email address was transferred to the management company with full transparency protocols. The audit also found that Shirley had been receiving a quarterly stipend from the tow vendor as a referral fee, which violated both the HOA covenants and state law. The board referred the matter to the county attorney for potential prosecution. I got a call from Casey that afternoon. Did you see the news? Shirley just got hit with a written warning for harassment behavior from the county. If she contacts any Hillcrest homeowner in the next year, she is looking at a restraint order and possible charges. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Good. Casey laughed. And get this, the HOA just sent out a correction email retracting the smear. They admitted the compliance system was broken, apologized to everyone who was affected, and promised new oversight. You did it. You actually did it. I did not do it alone. Casey helped. Marcus helped. Every neighbor who showed up to that meeting helped. But yeah, we did it. And it felt good. A week later, I got a formal letter from the board. It was a documented no trespass instruction delivered to Shirley in writing, banning her from all HOA property and events for 1 year. The letter was CC'd to every homeowner in the neighborhood, along with a public apology for the systemic failures in the compliance process. The board also announced new policies. All case files would be digitized and accessible through the portal. All enforcement actions would require a vote by at least 3 board members, and all vendor contracts would be reviewed annually by an independent auditor. It was not perfect, but it was progress. The real payoff came 3 months later when the HOA held its annual meeting. Shirley did not show. But her name came up during the treasurer's report because the audit had uncovered something even bigger: a discrepancy in the reserve fund. Over the last 2 years, the reserve fund had been drained by almost $30,000 in unaccounted towing fees and compliance enforcement costs. The auditor traced the money to invoices submitted by the tow vendor, but the invoices did not match any documented violations or board votes. In other words, Shirley had been authorizing tows that never happened and pocketing the kickback fees. The board voted unanimously to pursue legal action for restitution and filed a formal complaint with the state attorney general. And here is the kicker. During the treasurer's report, someone pulled up the old meeting minutes from the year Shirley was first elected to the board. She had campaigned on a platform of tough enforcement and zero tolerance for violations. Her slogan was, "You think this is petty? I think this is my purpose." The treasurer read that line out loud, then pulled up the audit findings showing the fake case numbers and backdated violations. "So let me get this straight," the treasurer said. Shirley claimed her purpose was enforcement, but the audit shows she violated the covenants more than anyone. She quoted minutes and deadlines to homeowners, but the actual minutes contradict her. She said we can tow first and explain later, but she could not explain a single tow once we asked for documentation. The room erupted in laughter. It was brutal. It was perfect. And it was exactly the kind of karma Shirley deserved. I did not say anything during the meeting. I just sat in the back and watched it all unfold. Watching the board realize how deep the fraud went. Watching the neighbors connect the dots. Watching Shirley's legacy implode in real time. It was more satisfying than anything I could have planned. After the meeting, Marcus found me in the parking lot. "That was the most satisfying thing I have ever seen," he said. She spent years terrorizing people, and now her own words are being used against her. I nodded. She thought she could control the narrative. But documentation does not lie. And once people started asking questions, the whole thing fell apart. Marcus laughed. "You know what the best part is? She is stuck. She cannot come back to the neighborhood. She cannot run for the board again. And everyone knows what she did. That is a special kind of justice." I got in my truck and drove home, feeling lighter than I had in months. The debt I had been paying off was still there. The work truck was still parked in my driveway. But I was not looking over my shoulder anymore. I was not wondering when the next fake notice would show up. I was not waiting for the tow truck to roll up at 3 in the morning. I was free. And so was everyone else Shirley had targeted. The final piece of the story came 6 months later, when I got a check in the mail from the HOA. It was a refund for the fine I never paid, plus interest, plus a share of the restitution recovered from the tow vendor. The check was signed by the new board president, a woman named Angela, who had run on a transparency platform and won by a landslide. The memo line said, "With our apologies." I deposited the check, then framed the letter from the county attorney confirming that Shirley had been charged with fraud and embezzlement. She pled no contest and accepted a settlement that included restitution, probation, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. I hung the letter on my office wall, right next to the tow release receipt and the reassigned case file photos. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that documentation matters, that asking questions matters, and that standing up to bullies even when it feels impossible is always worth it. A year after the hearing, I was sitting on my porch when a moving truck pulled up across the street. A young couple got out, looking around the neighborhood with the kind of nervous excitement you get when you are moving into your first house. The guy waved at me. I waved back. A few minutes later, they walked over and introduced themselves. "We just closed yesterday," the woman said. "This is our first time owning a home. We are so excited." I smiled. "Welcome to Hillcrest. It is a good neighborhood." The guy glanced at the HOA sign near the entrance. "We heard there were some issues with the board a while back. Is that still a thing?" I shook my head. "Not anymore. They cleaned house. New board, New policies, full transparency. You will be fine. Just keep your paperwork, read the covenants, and do not be afraid to ask questions if something does not make sense. The woman nodded. Good to know. Thanks. They walked back to their truck, and I watched them unload boxes, feeling something I had not felt in a long time. Hope, not just for them, but for the whole neighborhood. Because the thing about cold cases is that they do not stay cold forever. Someone always digs them up. Someone always asks the right question. And when they do, the truth comes out. It just takes one person who refuses to give up. One person who is willing to fight back. And in the end, that is all it took to bring Shirley down. One person who said no. If you made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the little guy wins. I still live in Hillcrest. I still park my work truck in the driveway. And I still get the occasional email from a neighbor asking for advice on dealing with their own HOA nightmare. I always reply. I always help. Because I know what it feels like to be targeted by someone who thinks the rules do not apply to them. And I know what it feels like to win. The HOA is not perfect. No HOA is. But it is better. The board meetings are recorded and posted online. The compliance process is transparent. The vendor contracts are public. And every homeowner has access to their own file, with no restrictions and no games. Shirley tried to bury the truth. She tried to intimidate people into silence. She tried to rewrite history and cover her tracks. But in the end, the paper trail told the story she did not want told. And that story brought her down. Glad you stayed for the whole story.